Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at CoreWeave. It is time for another update as we have managed to break out here in a pretty direct fashion out of both areas of resistance that we are tracking in possible further extensions lower. Now there was a third interpretation that we didn't leave here on the chart because we already had two bearish scenarios, but it seems we actually need to bring it out in this video. But before we get there, I would like to go quickly through the larger time frame for any of you who might be new. And on this chart we have been tracking this idea of a larger wave 1 to the upside complete and the wave 2 correction ever since we actually started increasing this momentum to the downside around this time frame when we first covered this stock. We had this wave 1 top, we had this exact area of support with the levels between the $97 all the way down to the $48.5 level, and we were looking for a larger retracement, a larger correction in a 3-wave pattern within the wave 2. We had along the way an opportunity to actually find a bottom. We can consider maybe even a couple of opportunities if we also allow this initial movement to the upside to be counted, but as we didn't manage to create a more reliable structure to the upside, we started favoring this interpretation of a reset within the wave 2 in white ever since we failed basically to hold here the relevant area of support for a possible direct impulse to form to the upside end. That would have been a possible initial wave 1 within a larger wave 3. Now we are still looking here for a third wave to the upside to be formed, and from a large time frame perspective nothing has really changed. We did require only that we hold here the area of support to keep the high probabilities for continuation in a third wave to the upside. And so far, even though we extended lower within this yellow interpretation, we only pushed here perfectly into the 61.8% retracement. There is no significant break of the area of support that would actually suggest that we should not be considering a reversal into a third wave to the upside. And now that we have actually this more significant reaction, we maybe should even consider to look here for an ideal target for such a wave 3. Now this is, once again, assuming that we have already bottomed within the wave 2 and that we are to form a wave 3 to the upside. The ideal target would be here at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1, which is the $685 level. Around that area is the ideal target for a larger third wave to the upside to be developing. Now, keep in mind, this could take many years to actually form. This does not need to form in a direct fashion, especially it shouldn't be expected that it would form within the same time span as this wave 1, and the wave 3 could have just an internal wave 1 that could take many months, maybe even more years than it took to form this initial wave 1 to the upside. So I wouldn't necessarily have any assumptions on those aspects. Now, we may have gotten a bit ahead of ourselves because at the moment we don't necessarily have a clear signal that we have bottomed. For that I would like to actually see an initial 5-wave move to the upside on a larger scale. So right now, here in this wave C, we have a full count that is possible, and I mentioned this even in the previous video, that we don't need any additional lows. We have sufficient waves to the downside to consider this structure complete. We had a lot of pressure to actually still push lower, as we were pushing into this area of resistance, and even here, honestly, we were considering a possible bottom. It was possible for us to track something like a WXY pattern, in which case we didn't need any additional lows even at that point. And sure, we did make here a slightly lower low, but it doesn't matter too much. This is on a very small time frame, and from a larger time frame perspective, we are looking here just at a 3-wave correction either way, where we have formed our wave 2. Now ideally we don't form any additional lows, although as I was mentioning, there was a third scenario that would actually allow an extension here within this 5th wave to the downside in yellow. And in that interpretation, we are still looking here, of course, for an ABC structure to be formed, since in this overall wave C we have been tracking all along an ending diagonal. Well, not necessarily all along, but ever since we actually formed this initial wave to the downside, it was highly suggestive that this structure was not going to form an impulse. There were signs that this should not necessarily be considered an impulse to be forming to the downside. And now, for this wave B, I would be watching here the resistance levels between the $73 all the way up to the $84.6 level, where we managed to push almost perfectly to the last level of resistance, and while we didn't necessarily break it just yet, those are already, or this is already, an interesting structure that could allow an or even a breakout, yeah. And as I was mentioning, there is no confirmation yet that we have bottomed, and for that I would like to see a couple of signs. So ideally, we have here a series of 1-2 setups that have formed, and we are in a larger impulse to the upside already, where this would be a 1-2, a third wave up, and now we would be looking here for a wave 4 correction. And while we build here this impulse, I would like to see a break above the resistance levels. This would be the first possible signal to actually determine within this area, since within this structure we would actually need probably 3 or 4 additional 4-5 patterns before we consider a complete count. And if we are to actually form an additional high within this area, we would have already broken above the resistance levels. Now within this structure, what I am focusing on, if we are to break higher, is the area of support for a wave 4 correction. And for such a pattern, I would be watching here the levels between the $79.9 level all the way down to the $75 level. And what is interesting here is the 50% retracement specifically, where actually I would like to track this in white. It would probably make it easier to determine the difference between the resistance level. But yeah, here, as long as we hold above the 50% retracement, we can still track a continuation higher within a fifth wave, completing a larger impulse within a potential wave 3. And at the moment, there is definitely still a risk that this could be just an ABC movement that has formed within the wave B. But yeah, it is still early, there isn't much data to work with within this area, and the most important thing to remember here is that if we break below the 50% retracement, we could still form continuation in an uptrend within this area. We could even form a larger 5-wave move to the upside, but it would be most likely within a diagonal structure. Sure, another 1-2 setup within this area could work out, but it would be such a low probability for this to be the interpretation that ends up following through that honestly I wouldn't even necessarily go ahead and consider it personally. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go ahead and track it. Even if we break below the 50% retracement and push higher from this area, I would most likely consider a different interpretation. There may be a slight or more specific case where it could work out, but honestly, this is what we are focusing on. For resistance, we have the $84.6 level, the orange interpretation, and for support for continuation higher, we have the white scenario, the $75 level, the 50% retracement. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.